千里之行，始于足下. A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Welcome to Tao Talks with Derek Lin, where we delve deeply into the Daodejing by Lao Tzu. Here is what chapter 48 looks like. And wow, very much a coincidence that, again, we have 8 lines, just like the previous couple of chapters. So the question to ask, the easy question is, will we be dividing this into 4 sets of 2 lines? Well, let's see. Let's start from the top. Let's begin from line 1 and looking at line 1, see if we can pick out repeating characters. So I definitely see 2 repeating characters immediately in lines 1 and 2. And I hope you can see them as well. The first character and the third character, they repeat themselves from line 1 to line 2. So I've emphasized them. And looking further down to line 3, we notice that this pattern does not repeat anymore. So we can definitely isolate line 1 and 2 as the beginning section. And then looking at 3 and 4, we don't see any commonality between the 2. Looking further down, we see a commonality between 4 and 5, in that the last 2 characters of 4 match the first 2 characters of 5. Like this. This provides continuity. And you can also look back a little bit and notice that from section 1 to section 2, the last character of line 2 matches the first character of line 3, and it's reiterated again in the last character of line 3. So that also provides continuity from one section to another. In this case, from line 4 to line 5, this is telling us that 3, 4, and 5 are a single thought. Therefore, we can identify those 3 lines as one section. And this means we now have 6, 7, and 8 as the final section. So here, in this particular chapter of 8 lines, it's not 2, 2, 2, 2. It's actually a section of 2 followed by 2 sections of 3 lines each. So it's a different structure. So then looking at the first 2 lines in terms of the context and meaning, the first 2 lines talk about the pursuit of knowledge versus the pursuit of the Tao. Then in the second section, we talk about loss and more loss until we get to Wu Wei. Those are the same 2 characters again, and a primary focus of this particular chapter. So what about the last section? Can we identify some repeating elements there? Well, it's possible, but it's not as obvious. Here's what they are. In line 6, the first 3 characters match the last 3 characters of line 8. So like I said, not so obvious. So these 3 characters mean take the world, and there's a specific meaning associated with that. We'll get to that in a moment. First, we need to focus on sections 1 and 2, starting with line 1 or section 1. We'll work our way down 1 line at a time for that complete comprehensive understanding. So let's take a look at line 1. Line 1 says, pursue knowledge, daily gain. And that's pretty much, that's mostly a very straightforward translation from the original. The second character means to study, it means scholarship, it means academic knowledge. The third character means day or daily. The final character is gain or benefit. And the first character is for, like for what. So for study, meaning to pursue knowledge, there is daily gain. When we look at this, it's easy to assume that this is talking about something positive. Why is that? Well, because at first glance, it seems positive because we're used to the idea that knowledge is power. So the second character there, scholarship, academia, knowledge, that seems like a good thing. Like, yeah, I want more knowledge, give me more. Then the character gain, we may also be inclined to think of that as positive because it is beneficial. So our default attitude may be, that's right, I want to gain more knowledge. Give me more knowledge. I love it. Now, the intent that Lao Tzu is trying to convey is actually not the assumption that we have here. In other words, here, when we put knowledge and gain together, it seems like doubly good, meaning gain is good, knowledge is good, put them together, gain knowledge, really good. But the actual original meaning of this line is the opposite. It's actually negative. And that, I know for the people who only have a superficial understanding of the Daodejing, it's going to be surprising. So how can this be explained? This would be this negativity that I'm talking about here in the last bullet. That negativity applies to knowledge, both knowledge and gain. So they're both negative things, or at least they're not positive. The way that I'll present it to you is that it's limited. Knowledge is limited. This can be radical because we have all seen the great progress in our civilization from technology, from science, from knowledge. So it's a radical notion to many people. How can this be explained? So to take a look at this whole idea, we're going to need to examine the whole idea of gain. And I have a slide devoted to that. 3 things can happen when you pursue knowledge blindly. And the character that I have at the very top is the character for gain or benefit. So 3 things can happen when you pursue knowledge blindly. Number 1, some of the information will be contradictory. Greater complexity leads to greater confusion. You may recall one of the examples that I used last time was about how things are now on the internet. The internet provides a vast amount of information, and every possible perspective is represented. And if you just try to gather all the information you can from the internet, you're pretty much guaranteed that you're going to be getting information that contradict one another. You're going to have pros and cons. You're going to have one side of the issue versus the other side. Greater complexity leads to greater confusion because vast amount of information is not insight, does not equal insight, does not equal the truth or wisdom. So we can describe this as too much information. That's actually one of our daily expressions. Oh, that's too much, that's way too much information. You know, that's information overload. So that's one limitation when we pursue knowledge blindly. What's another one? Well, this ties together knowing things with desiring things. Number two, the more you see, the more you want. All the sensory stimulation can blur the difference between what I call shiny objects and what you actually need. So the sensory stimulation, referring to the sights and sounds of the material world, shiny objects, the things that excite you, the things that may look really interesting, things that you may want, but they may not be what you actually need, the shiny objects. And I actually have quite a few friends who are easily distracted by shiny objects. It's actually possible with some of them to change the topic of conversation very quickly by introducing something that is a shiny object. Then it's like, oh, wow, okay, what is that? So with greater desires, with more acquisitions, what can happen is that you lose the sense of contentment. Contentment brings a true state of happiness, lasting joy, but you can easily lose that feeling of being content because the shiny objects out there excite the desires, and not having them causes some sort of anxiety. So this robs you of your peace of mind. So that's number two. And then let me also talk about number three. Knowledge for its own sake can be disconnected from reality. We can forget to apply knowledge in the real world. This is very common. We look at theories, and here again, I have friends, I know people who look at theories all the time. They read one book after another. And I notice one thing about them. I notice they never apply any of what they read to life. When that is the case, they don't even know for sure that the theories they read about are actually workable or actually practical in life. So what they think is powerful knowledge that they have absorbed may be completely disconnected from reality. So that would be the third thing that I would bring to your attention. Now, there is a great example. There's a way that we can illustrate this idea about the limitation of knowledge. So we're about to get into that. Before we get into it, what I would like to do is to, now that we're at the halfway point in our meeting, we should take a break for 5 minutes. To kind of summarize this slide that you see in front of you, basically we're talking about three main things about knowledge. That number one, you can have too much information, you can have information overload. Number two, excessive desires can lead to anxiety and worries. And number three, knowledge can be outdated, obsolete, knowledge can be impractical. So now, to illustrate the idea in the Tao about the limitation of knowledge, let's dig a little deeper. One thing to note is that in the Daodejing, this chapter, chapter 48, is not the only one that speaks against knowledge. We have already seen the same idea expressed a couple of times. Example, in Daodejing, chapter 19, abandon sagacity, discard knowledge, the people benefit 100-fold. So that's a pretty emphatic statement. It is saying that the people benefit a lot by discarding knowledge. So then you got to think, what's Lao Tzu got against knowledge? Just by looking at that line. And this is the beginning of the chapter, chapter 19. In a similar way, in the next chapter, in the beginning of Daodejing chapter 20, Lao Tzu says, "And learning, no more worries," which is also against the whole idea of academic knowledge. And now that we're talking about this, you can begin to see the pattern that Lao Tzu has this notion about the limitation of knowledge. This is contrary to what is considered common sense for many people. So then a very valid question to ask is, well, how can this be? How can we reconcile this to, what we typically know as the power of knowledge, as how knowledge has brought about all these great benefits to society, to the world, to civilization. So then there is a good way to illustrate this. There's an example that will put this into the proper context with the clarity that Tao sages see. And this actually comes from not ancient Asian sources, but modern Western source. It's the tailor metaphor. And you may be thinking, well, what does a tailor have to do with it? What's that got to do with anything when it comes to knowledge? This actually comes from Michael Crichton, and that's the author of Jurassic Park and other well-known works. And it's a very interesting metaphor. It talks about how if you think about a tailor, a skillful tailor, the tailor's job is to take measurements of his clients and make clothes. Of course, we all know that. And we can say that this tailor is extremely good at what he does. He can take just a few measurements of his clients, and we'll call his client George, just arbitrarily. The tailor can do so with great accuracy. And from these measurements, the tailor can calculate other dimensions with confidence. He can create a suit and make sure that it fits perfectly. He is so proficient at this, once he has the measurements on file, recorded, documented, from that point on, he can make other suits of whatever style or design George, his client, may want. They too will fit perfectly. This is a metaphorical way to say that knowledge is like the tailor. Science and technology are like the tailor, able to take accurate measurements, able to create a suit that fits perfectly. So a well-fitting suit, in this case, is metaphorical language to describe the benefits that technology, knowledge, etc. have brought to our civilization. All the great achievements of science. It's all about the study of physical phenomena, measurements, and the creation of technology to leverage that knowledge, suits. So then, because the tailor had a lot of interaction with his client, George, taking measurements, we go to imagine what would happen if we go to the tailor. We're trying to figure out this person, George, what is he like? So we go to the tailor and we say, Mr. Tailor, what is George like? So the tailor, he has a lot of clients, so he's going to look in his files, he's going to pull up the record for George, the client, and he's going to look at it, and then he's going to be very confident. He's going to be able to say, I see, George is a 44 medium. And we find that this fact, although true, doesn't really tell us about George. So it's not exactly what we're looking for. So we say, Mr. Taylor, is that all you can tell us? Now, the tailor may be a little irritated that we assume he doesn't know a whole lot. So he'll say, well, I have other information. I can tell you that his neck size is 17. The best slacks for him are 36 to 38 inches. Okay, that's great. But what kind of person is he? What kind of person is George? What are his likes, dislikes? What are his dreams and aspirations? What are his hopes and fears, Mr. Taylor? And he would be like, look, you're asking the wrong person. How would I know what his hopes and dreams are? I just take his measurements. And that's exactly it. The measurements of George the client, while accurate, and the ability to create different suits of different designs, no doubt, very powerful. But is it always the right tool for everything? Now, we're not denying that the well-fitting suits are very useful. They look great, good material, and all that. Comfortable to wear, looking good. Now, you see the point that this fictional exchange is trying to make. The facts at the tailor's command are not the most significant or even the most interesting things about George. To really understand George, and George is really just a metaphor for life, we need to seek the answers to our questions someplace else. That's just another way to say, to answer the most interesting questions about life, we can't just be looking at knowledge. That's the way it is. So how do we get to know George or life? Well, you have to interact with George. You have to talk to him. You have to learn from that experience. You have to talk to his friends. You have to get that in-depth interaction. You got to be asking questions at the right place. And that means in order for us to understand life, to understand existence, the way for us to do it is to quote unquote interact with George. That means to live, to observe, to learn. It's about direct experience. It's about not just knowledge, but intuition. And of course, it can help for us to learn from other people who already know George, like really know him, not like the tailor, but know him as a person, and then ask them instead of the tailor. So this is equivalent to us reading books by wise sages who have figured out at least part of the puzzle about life, reading the books of wisdom, like the Daodejing. So this is the metaphor. This is what I call the tailor metaphor, and I summarize it in one sentence here. The tailor can tell you all about the measurements, but not the person. So knowledge can tell us all about the facts related to the universe, but not the wisdom. This brings us to the following. Take a look at this. What I have done here is that I have lined up the different levels of Tao cultivation. In this scheme that you see here, you can see sort of the faint suggestion of stairs, and that's because these are progressions. These are different levels of understanding, and you go from one to the other sequentially. At the very bottom of this particular stairway, you see the first line from chapter 48, and that is pursue knowledge, daily gain. This is what is interesting about the Tao most people are still stuck at the level of knowledge is power. Tao cultivators realize beyond that, the process of gaining knowledge, although not a bad thing, can be useful, but it's actually at the lowest level. And it's actually just the beginning stage of your spiritual quest. Yeah, the pursuit of knowledge is just table stakes. It's just a way to gain a mission. You're not even getting to Tao 101 just yet. So a couple of things about that. The trap of knowledge is exactly as we have talked about before, meaning the limitation of knowledge. The problem with knowledge, especially knowledge that's disconnected from reality, is that it can distort your values toward the material things, positions, reputation, and it'll bring more burdens into your life. So a little bit more about that later. The other thought associated with this beginning level is that the objects to pursue are often dictated by society and peer pressure. It may be a nice house, a nice job, nice car, nice this, nice that. These are dictated by the expectations of others. They are not necessarily what nourishes your spirit. So this is what we find at the bottom of the staircase. Let's continue on with our discussion. What about the next level up? Next level up is represented in line 2. Line 2 says, pursue Tao, daily loss. So this is the opposite of line 1. And what is remarkable about this line is that the word loss, this is a straightforward translation of the last character. It is often seen as a negative. I don't want to lose anything. If I lose something, I suffer a loss. And I use the word suffer in that negative connotation. It's so often seen as negative, it may be surprising that Lao Tzu associates loss with the Tao. Now, hopefully, everyone who's listening to me, you've already been looking through Tao material for some time, so you realize that things are not exactly as they appear on the surface. So loss is not necessarily a negative in the Tao. For some people, it may be that they look at line 1, pursue knowledge, daily gain. Okay, that's good. But then they see pursue Tao, daily loss. They then have to do a double take. That is, they have to go back to line 1. Hey, I thought that was positive, but if I pursue Tao, there's daily loss. That should be positive in a book about the Tao, the Daodejing. Therefore, I got to go back to re-examine line 1 because now I begin to realize line 1 may actually be a negative context. I find that, so this is one of my favorite things about the Daodejing. A lot of times, as I explore spirituality, different religious traditions, I often hear people say, all traditions are similar. All traditions are teaching people to be good, and that it's things that you can figure out on your own. I find that to not be the case with the Tao. I find that the Daodejing points to wisdom that can seem contrary to common sense, and yet, if you devote the time and the effort to understand exactly what Lao Tzu was talking about, you see the truth in his words. You find an understanding that's different from the common conception, and it benefits you tremendously. So that is what makes the Daodejing valuable to me, and I hope to you as well. So then here, we're being asked to re-examine our notions, possibly even reverse the way we think, the way we look at the world. So the default perspective given to us by society is increase with everything, increase in possessions, increase in net worth, increase in reputation, popularity. Lao Tzu is saying, no, stop, slow down and stop. Look at the opposite. Look at decrease instead of increase as the path to mastering one's destiny. Decrease, not increase. Loss, not gain. So let's dig into this a little more deeply. This is the unexpected, surprising, counterintuitive part of the Tao. At the top of the slide, I have the character for loss. So the question, what do you lose when you pursue the Tao? People don't want to lose. What do you lose? This is an important question. Well, number one, you begin to see through the illusions of life. You lose the state of ignorance that you had before while under the illusion. What illusion? The illusion that things in life are lasting or permanent or true. They're actually illusions because everything is fleeting, transient, impermanent. Time is limited for all of us. In fact, for those of you who have delved into Buddhist teachings, you recognize transience as a major teaching in Buddhism. Same with impermanence. And it's talking about the same thing, that everything in life comes and goes. Nothing really lasts. Just when you get used to one particular thing, it is gone. So we're powerfully reminded of this. And, mortality, same thing. Our life, same thing. Our existence, same thing. Fleeting, transient, impermanent. Every time we lose a loved one passes on. It's a powerful reminder that nothing really lasts. We always kind of felt, the loved ones in our family, our good friends, we feel like they're going to be around forever. Well, that is the illusion. That's an illusion that if you want clarity about life, spirituality, you would want to lose that particular illusion. So when you pursue the Tao, that's one of the many things that you can lose. Let's do another one. You begin to let go of material attachments. So number one, the fleeting aspects, the transient nature of life is central to everything, including material attachments, material things. All your possessions have an imprisonment aspect to them, that when you have them, some of them, if you are not careful, can make it so that you are bound by them. What do I mean by that? Look at the next bullet. Things need to be stored. They need to be put away. That takes up space. Tools, maybe like your vehicle, require maintenance. All tools require some kind of maintenance. Treasures, costly items, things that have a high price tag, they need to be locked up, protected from theft, or insured. Belongings need to go with you when you move, or perhaps when you travel. Now, these examples go on and on and on. I'm just trying to point out that all the things you own, there is a possibility they own you and not the other way around. They can all tie you down. So this is another one of the things that you can lose when you pursue the Tao. When you are no longer attached to certain things, you can be free of their specific bondage. Number 3, you begin to distill the useful and discard the useless. And that means some of the things you lose when you pursue the Tao is the fluff. The things that don't apply to you, the things that are not practical for you, the things that may be useful to someone else but not to you. And ultimately, this is what the Tao is all about. It's about refining what works well for you in your life. Now, there are commonalities that we all share as human beings, so what works well for me may work well for you, although I cannot make that an absolute guarantee. What works well for a whole lot of people when they cultivate the Tao may be working really well for us as well. So overall, my comments on this particular slide is that the more you lose your illusions, the more you see things in the proper perspective. Because, why engage in petty conflicts? Life is too short. Literally, life is too short. And when you are able to let go of material attachments, you can experience freedom, liberation from anxiety and worries. No doubt about that. And number 3, through practical applications of knowledge, you can turn that knowledge into wisdom. You can refine knowledge into wisdom. And with number 3, I want to zoom in on this idea of refinement, refining knowledge. Refining knowledge into wisdom. Let's take them one by one. First of all, I want to talk about raw, unfiltered information. Think about information like crude oil. And I have a offshore drilling rig here to represent that. So think about crude oil in its most rudimentary form. Information manifests as facts, figures, statistics. Maybe just a bunch of numbers, not immediately useful upon extraction. Just like crude oil upon extraction from the earth, not immediately useful. You got to work on them some. You have to refine them. So number 2, information is refined into knowledge, much like crude oil is refined into gasoline. So knowledge, the refined form of information, manifests as know-how, skills that you learn, techniques that you learn, etc. This is, in fact, what most people use in their day-to-day lives. Not necessarily raw information, but refined information as knowledge. So I use traffic. I use a whole bunch of cars, and there's a bus in there, there's motorcycles in there. These are different ways that we utilize gasoline, meaning knowledge that was refined from information. So then the ultimate level of this refinement is wisdom. That when you apply knowledge to life, you can gain wisdom. Wisdom, unlike gasoline, is more like jet fuel. Knowledge may be powerful, but wisdom is transcendent or transcendental. It goes beyond. Like a jet plane, it flies above traffic. And so I'll use an aircraft here to represent that. This is the realm of sages and Tao cultivators. This is what we want to explore and what we want to utilize. So it's actually a couple of stages removed from raw information, crude oil. It has to be refined and refined further. And I'm showing this specifically to make the point that it isn't just one stage of refinement. When it comes to the Tao, from knowledge to wisdom is actually many stages of refinement. It's actually an iterative process. It's a repeating process that repeats over and over again. So now we're ready to add to our stairway. The next step up, the next level up from pursuing knowledge, daily gain, is in fact when you start to pursue the Tao. This is where Tao 101 is at. When you pursue Tao, there's daily laws. And now you understand why daily laws goes hand in hand with the Tao. They definitely belong together. It's important for us to see the connection between the two. So a couple of comments I'll make about the pursuit of the Tao, the daily laws aspect of it. When you embark on the Tao, when you are just starting out on the Tao, you quickly realize that the path of the Tao is subtraction, not addition. Reduce, not adding to. Decrease, not increase. Loss, not gain. It is where you gradually lose your attachments one by one. And when I say attachments, I mean physical things, I mean mental things, emotions, regrets, past memories. All attachments are gradually loosened and relaxed, so no longer one by one have hold on you. So that when you begin to get beyond the idea of getting more and more things, higher and higher positions, that is also the beginning of liberation, spiritual liberation. You're not tied down by society's expectations of how you should be, what you should be, who you should be. You become your own person when you begin this process. Now, you can tell already that the pursuit of the Tao is at a higher level beyond the pursuit of knowledge. You can also see that above pursue Tao daily laws, there's more. You still got higher levels on the stairway to explore. So let's continue that exploration. This brings us down to line 3, loss and more loss. This is talking about the repetitive, iterative refinement process that I was talking about just a moment ago. The discarding and distilling process of Tao cultivation never actually stops. It's continuous refinement. The emphasis is always on quality, not quantity. So I was talking about a moment ago, information overload, too much information. When you refine that, you discard useless information, information that does not apply to you. You focus on the rest until you get quality information, actionable information, information that deliver insights, deliver useful insights that you can actually apply. So let's talk about what this means in the various aspects of life, starting with the mind. In terms of your mind, refinement means continuously sharpening your focus and clarifying your understanding of the Tao. So we're all going through that process right now. Every time I go through the Daodejing, I learn something new. I refine my understanding a little bit more than before. And I hope the same is also true for everyone. And the more benefits I'm able to extract out of it, and those benefits like gasoline and eventually like jet fuel becomes increasingly powerful. Let's talk about the other aspects. We started out with the mind. What else? So in terms of your physical environment, where you live, where you work, this means discarding clutter. There's actually a lot of stuff that we don't need within our environment. And I know that, of course, from personal experience. I used to have a lot of clutter Not to the point of hoarding, but I definitely had more than I actually needed. I have less now, but I am still in this process of continuous refinement. Number 3, loss and more loss. I still need to look at what I have and refine my possessions further, meaning I still need to discard more of my belongings. Let's take a look at work. In terms of your work, what you do, what you focus your mind, your attention on, in terms of your work, refinement means the development of specific expertise. So what I mean by that is that when you want to get really good at what you do, you become not the jack of all trades, master of none, but you specialize in a particular skill that makes you irreplaceable. So that process is also refinement. That process is what makes you better as an individual, as an employee, as a worker, and more valuable as well. And what else? In terms of your interactions with other people, this means deep connection with a few friends rather than shallow acquaintance with many. So this is something for which I definitely have, personal experience as well. I remember that I know this particular friend, a friend for many years, I would even say a few decades now, easily the most popular guy I know. Just a social butterfly, very friendly with everyone, always has a big smile, always has a lot of personal charisma. He seems to know everybody, his buddies with everybody, and people know him, people like him. So I remember one time he invited me to his birthday party. When I showed up, I was amazed by the number of people there. The place was packed, tons of people, probably like 100 people or more. It was sort of like attending a show, like a concert, except it was only a birthday party. Now, of course, I was nowhere near as popular. If I had a birthday party, there may be like a dozen people there at the most. So I thought, wouldn't it be great to have even just a small fraction of that popularity? Even if I'm just half as popular as he was, wouldn't that be great? Now, one thing about him was that he, like me, was very interested in the big questions of life. And what I mean by big questions, I'm talking about the deep questions. What is the meaning? What is the purpose? So my friend said more than a few times that this was the one thing he really wanted to go into great details in depth, to have that heart-to-heart discussion, to go into those topics. So he would say things like, could you do me a really big favor? Can you send me a message, set up a time so we can have lunch and talk about this stuff? I really want to do that. And of course, it'll be my treat. And I would say, sure, no problem. But every time we said that, he would always have to apologize. He would always say, oh, I'm so sorry, I can't make it. Usually he was on his way somewhere because he got invited to something that he could not turn down. So after many times, many iterations, it started to get ridiculous. And I always remember this one time he said, I'm so sorry to do it again. I feel trapped. I feel like a prisoner. I just can't do what I really want to do. And I'm surprised by this apology. I said, prisoner? Trapped by what? So he poured out his heart. Literally, it surprised me. He explained that being popular was not the great thing that I thought it was. He said, well, you've been to my birthday party. You'll remember how many people were there, right? Right. Well, all those people had birthdays too. They came to my birthday, so I'm obligated to go to theirs. So that was it made sense. It was an angle that I hadn't considered. I said, well, how about excusing yourself from some of them? He said, I excuse myself from most of them. For the ones that are left, I'm still triple booked most weekends. And now that he mentioned it, I started to tie up some of the loose ends. I could see that whenever I saw him at different places, he was always showing up, hanging around for a short time, and then making some kind of excuse to go away. And then I realized beneath that friendly exterior, beneath that big smile, there was someone who was literally exhausted all the time. He said late at night, when he would get home, that's when everything felt completely empty. That emptiness ate away at him, and it drove him to lose himself more in even more social events. So looking back all these years, illuminated by the wisdom of the Tao, I begin to understand. I see the extremes of anything, including socializing, social contacts, can become just as binding as owning material things. It's certainly not the liberation, not the freedom of the Tao. Having seen that, now I realize that my wish to be half as popular as it was is actually kind of foolish. It would actually be more of a curse than a blessing. The better way, everybody, is exactly what Lao Tzu suggests. Reduce, decrease the quantity, but increase the quality. Cultivate deep, enduring friendship rather than shallow acquaintance. That is actually the key to happiness. So as you can see, even in something as simple as social interactions, there's a lot in the wisdom of the Tao. So we're running out of time. We're going to need to go to our summary for today. How do we apply the Daodejing? Well, today we ended our discussion on 47, and this is the summary slide from last time, applying the three characteristics of the sage. There's the teaching about the internal orientation, inside the door, not outside the door. There's the idea about knowing one aspect and knowing the totality. That's number 2. And then there's the unattached actions, which we are focusing on in this chapter, chapter 48. So here is the summary for 48. There's gonna be 4 levels. We have explored only half of them. We have explored the first level, the beginning level, pursue knowledge, daily gain. And then we also talked about the next level up, pursue Tao, daily loss. And now you understand why gain can be negative and loss can be positive. There are 2 other ones. The next one, there's loss and more loss that we're just getting into now until we get into Wu Wei, unattached action. We'll talk about that more next time. And then the level of Wu Wei is represented by Wu Wei or Wu Bu Wei. With unattached action, there's nothing one cannot do. So I can't wait to share with everyone the insights of Lao Tzu about this state where there is literally nothing you cannot do. A powerful teaching. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Let us travel safely. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.